Year-end processing is done on the last period of your fiscal year. When you do your period end processing, it will do the year-end processing automatically. Why do we want to close the module? It closes the period for data entry, so you're not putting additional entries in a prior period where you don't want them. It will default a lot of your reports to the current period and year instead of having to go and manually change them all the time. It allows you to review your reports and correct and update the information to make sure that your data is kept accurate and up to date. It also, based on your history settings in each of the modules, it will purge old data. So if you have a setting of 10 years, anything prior to that will be purged. I recommend that you use the same history settings for each module. So if you're going to do 10 years in one, you should do 10 years in all of them. The reason for this is if you want to go back and look at something and you have different history settings, you may not have the same thing available in each module. Again, it's your choice, but it's just a recommendation. What you need to do before you start year-end processing. Always make a full backup of your entire Sage 100 system. An archived copy of your company within Sage using the company maintenance copy function in Library Master is recommended too. If you're going to purge old data, this archived company would have that information still in there. So if you ever need to go back and look, it will still be there. You won't have lost it. All registers and journals for all of your modules should be posted before performing your year-end processing, and users should be out of Sage while you're doing your period end processing to avoid getting a file in use message when you're trying to do your updates. We're going to go in and review the options for each of the modules that we're going to look at before we go through the year-end processing processes. The number of days or months or years to retain your history should be verified and any changes made prior to doing this. The default year is set to a minimum of 2, but that only saves your current year and your prior year. So if you saved just 2 years, you closed this current year, you would get last year's information and the current month. So you'd only have 13 months of data. That's why we recommend that you do a longer period of time. You also want to run any applicable reports. You can print the year-end reports during period end and year-end processing, and you can also use them during the period end report selection. It's a lot easier to run the reports early, especially if you're going to do reconciliation, so that you know that the numbers are correct before you get to year end. So let's talk about Sage's order of closing recommendations. From top to bottom, we're closing bill of material, work order. If you don't have the work order, you've got the new production management, that one will be closed. Barcode, purchase order, sales order, inventory, MRP, payroll, receivables, payables, job cost, bank reconciliation, and general ledger. Now, obviously, if you don't own the module, you can just skip that. And this closing in this order is done because of specific reasons. So if you're doing sales order processing, that updates to inventory and receivables and general ledger. So you should do your sales order processing first, because if you close inventory and receivables before that, you won't be able to do your invoice update to that particular period in inventory or accounts receivable. And another example, job costs can post invoices to receivables, receivables can post to job costs, so you want to make sure the registers and journals are all updated prior to running this. Some modules do not have period end processing or only have a year end. Material requirements planning, for an example, only has year end, not period end. Okay, we're going to switch over to our live company so that we can go in and start. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our company maintenance. There are some options in here that you might want to set. We're going to go into company maintenance here, and we're going to call up our test company that I've created. And we're going to go into the dates tab. And in here, we have a couple choices that you may or may not want to do. You can restrict the accounting date to the current and one future period so that users can only be in if you close January and the next month of February, or December and the next month would be January. This eliminates people posting to 12/31/2023 by mistake at the beginning of the year. Now, if you only want certain people to do this, you can also have an overridden role maintenance, which allows other users like your system administrator or office managers or something else to be able to post it to any date that they need to. You also have the option of using the document date warning, where if they're posting the document date, which is an invoice date, a check date, that kind of thing, not your actual accounting date that you're posting to the general ledger for, you can tell it that I only want to be able to put documents in for so many prior periods or dates so many months out in advance. Okay. So we can make those changes and click accept if we want them. Then we're going to go over to our purchase order. Now, prior to closing our purchase order, we want to verify that all our receipts, invoices, and returns for the period are posted. We want to change the module date, and mine is set to 12/31/2025 because that's where my demo data is. We want to review the purchase order setup options, review the open purchase order report, and we're going to print and preview the purchases clearing and verify that it agrees to the general ledger. This is one of the reconciliations at year-end that should be done. And we're also going to look at the purge utilities that are available in this module. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go in purchase order setup to purchase order options. We're going to go to the main tab, and we're going to check to make sure that we're in the correct period. And we're also going to look at the number of days to retain completed purchase orders. So when we do our year-end processing, if there's any completed purchase orders, which means it's been received and invoiced and it's in a status marked completed, and it's more than 999 days old since the completion, it will be purged from your system. You can have this number of days set from anywhere from 0 to 999. Then we're going to go over to the history tab, and we're going to see how many years we want to save the purchase history for the item and vendor. Again, you can retain between 2 and 99 years. It's retained until it's automatically purged during period end processing or year-end processing, or you can manually purge it using the purge history utility. You must retain at least 2 years of history. Once we've made those changes, we can get out of that, and we're going to go in and we're going to look at the open purchase order report. This is something we want to review before we close the year to make sure that we don't have old purchase orders that don't belong in there. So this gives us a list of all of our purchase orders, all of the lines. It takes us in and shows us what we've got ordered, what we've got received, and what's back ordered. It's a good idea to do this on a regular basis to make sure that there aren't some old ones there, because sometimes you didn't get the 5 that you were still waiting for. You can change your quantity, close the purchase order, get it out of your system. Otherwise, it will stay in. You also want to go in and take a look at all the master and repeating orders, because based on their expiration date, so in purchase order entry, we can also look at this in Business Insights Explorer that I'll show you in just a minute. If we look at the order type master and repeating, and we go in here and we look, this has an expiration date of 12/31/2025. Now, if I close, this will be removed from the system because my expiration date falls within that time period. If you want to keep it, you will need to change your expire date for your master and repeating orders to something later than that. You can also look at this open purchase order report. And here's the expire date. So that's what you want to look at for your master and repeating orders. You can also go into Explore to your purchase order view. And this just gives you a list of all your purchase orders. You can change it by type. You can sort it different ways. You can also export this out to Excel. And all the modules have these reports. It's just an easy way to eyeball it and give you an idea. Well, maybe some of these we don't really want to keep because like these go back to 2022. My system is at 2025. These are completed, so they'll fall off my system anyway. But if they were still open, maybe I don't really need to keep them. The other thing that we need to go look at is our purchases clearing report. And we will find that under our period end. We select purchases clearing report. Now, I've saved this as a custom report setting. And the reason I did this is if you go in and you do a receipt of goods, and then later you go back in and you change the unit cost, when you run this purchases clearing report, the dollar amount balance is going to change. And I'll show you that. So we're doing our purchases clearing report here. So this shows us everything that we have that's still open. Now, this report is used to reconcile the purchases clearing account in general ledger with the open amounts on the purchase order. This includes the quantity ordered, the quantity received, the quantity invoiced, and these three should match to complete. If you have in your settings that you allow over receipts, then your quantity received can be higher than your quantity ordered, but your quantity invoiced has to match. Once these all match, it will be marked as complete. It will not show up on this purchases clearing report. This is only for the ones that are still open for some reason or another. And this one here, there hasn't been anything received, but there's been 5 invoiced. This one here, you've got 2 received and no invoiced yet. Now, if I went in and I changed my unit cost after I received it, it would update this cost to the new cost, but it wouldn't be what I posted to my general ledger. And I'm trying to tie out this number with my accounts receivable purchases clearing account, which is set up in each product line in inventory management, product line maintenance, and it's a liability holding account for when we have goods that have been received or an invoice that have been received, but we don't have the other side of the entry. It's like a accounts payable holding account. Once we have both of them, it clears it out. The invoice is in accounts payable, and we don't see it on this report anymore. So the reason why I have this set to be net amount received, amount invoiced instead of last unit cost is because I don't want to have the wrong cost in there than what was posted to the general ledger so that my reconciliation will be correct. And if I want to keep this to always select it instead of having to pick it every single time, I can hit the save button, create a new one. I just put a new name in here and it will save it as my default report, and then it'll come up automatically instead of the standard. Okay, the other thing that we have available here is under our utilities, we have purging options. Now, when you have master and repeating orders, it will automatically purge at period end or year end. You can also purge completed or canceled PO recaps, completed purchase orders, which again will close automatically, but it can be done during the year if you want to. I don't recommend purging order history or receipt history unless there's a specific reason for it. And if you're going to do a purge, you should do it in a test company first to make sure that's what you want to do and that you're not going to be missing information that you really. So then we're going to go to our period end processing report selection. And these are other reports that are available. Now, we've already looked at the open purchase order report. There's an orders by item, expected delivery reports, cash requirements, recaps, history. I like to run mine outside of the period end. And the reason I do is you don't get to do selections in here. When you run a regular report, there's a lot of selections. I can do it by certain vendors, certain dates, that kind of thing. This just runs a standard report. So I don't have to print these reports, but I can if I want to. I can also say I don't want to see them and just take them out by deleting the rows, or I can delete them all, or there's a checkbox that will let me say, I don't want to print these reports, I've already got them. You can also, when you're running these reports, if you have them customized, you can use the customized one instead. Now, I only have the standard one, but it would give you a drop down and show you all the other ones. What it doesn't do is it doesn't have the list of custom crystal reports in there. So if we go here and then we go to period end processing, we're going to have a screen that shows us the year-end processing is going to be performed. If I don't want to print the reports, I can just uncheck this box. If I keep it checked, it will print my reports. And so it's going to say it will be performed for period 12, which for me is ending 12/31/2025. I'm going to click on proceed. And nothing's going to happen. And I should be getting a message here. It's not letting me. Okay, there we go. It's reactive. And then I'll get a message here that says period 12 ending 12/31/2025 will be changed to period 1 ending 1/31/23. And it's going to tell me the period end reports have not been printed and do I want to complete year-end processing. I click on yes, and it does a quick period end processing. This process only takes a couple minutes to do. I'm just going to say no here and get out of that. Now, what happens when you close the purchase order module? Your expired and repeating orders are automatically purged as of the year-ending date. Your completed purchase orders are automatically purged based on the number of days to retain completed purchase orders in the purchase order module options. The purchase order recaps automatically purged if selected in the purchase order options. The receipt history is automatically purged based on your selection in the options. And all purchase history and miscellaneous charges year-to-date balances are set to 0 as of the year-ending date. Moving on to sales order, which is the next one on our list. Prior to performing your year-end processing, we're going to change our module date to 12/31 or whatever your fiscal year is. We're going to verify that all invoices and shipments are posted. To make sure that the sales recap reports from sales order are in sync with the sales history for both the customer and inventory, you need to perform receivables and inventory period end in conjunction with the sales order year-end processing. You should do them prior to updating sales for the next period if you want them automatic. We're going to look at printing the open sales order report. We're going to review the sales order setup options. And there's no general ledger reconciliation and sales order to worry about. We're just going to do some cleanup. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our setup, and we're going to go to sales order options and verify that we're in the current period and the current year. I'm going to go take a look at our history and see how long we're going to keep this. And we're saying we're going to do it for 10 years. We're going to retain the history. We're going to retain the last purchase history. And then we want to take a look at our sales order, open sales order report, to make sure that we don't have any outstanding ones that are old that we may want to clear off. So this shows us all of the sales orders, the status of them, what's been ordered, received, shipped, what's on back order, the extension amount. This is what's still open. If there's any customer deposits, it will show us that. So this is our total of open sales. We don't have any customer deposits in this one. You can also look at that in your Business Insights Explorer. The other thing we want to take a look at in sales order is to make sure that our master and repeating orders take a look here, that our master and repeating orders, and we can sort it by this, their expiration date. Now this one here, when I close my 12/31/2025, this will be gone because its expiration date will fall prior to the new year. So if you want to keep these master repeating orders, you want to make sure your expiration date is going to be after your year-end close. We also have options to do purges in here. Under our utilities, we can purge expired orders, obsolete orders, full history. I don't recommend you purge lot and serial history or sales history. So just like purchase order, the same thing happens with our reports. These are all the reports that are available. We can choose to run them here. We can run them ahead of time. Once we've reconciled our open sales order report, these are just the history reports, which can be run later on. Then we're going to go to period end processing, same as purchase order. We can say we don't want to run the reports. We get the message that it's going to be performed for period 12. We click on proceed. Then we'll get the same message. Period 12 is being changed to period 1 of the next year. You warn us again, and we would just say yes here. It goes through its period end processing, and we're done. Now, the sales order recap will be purged based on your options. The expired master and repeating orders are purged automatically as of the period ending date. The sales history is purged based on the number of years to retain sales history and the sales order options that we took a look at. Our next one to close is our inventory. Prior to performing our year end, we want to make sure that our module date's the last date of the fiscal year. We're going to review the inventory setup options, verify that all inventory sales, receipts, transfers, issues, and adjustments are posted. And if you use LIFO, FIFO, you want to print the inventory negative tier report to check for negative tiers. If they do exist, they should be corrected. And we also want to print some year-end reports like the sales analysis, sales history, receipt history. We also want to print the inventory valuation report prior to any postings made to future periods. That one, like the purchases clearing report and your stock status report, is called the perpetual report, meaning it's only good the day that you run it. If you go in and you put entries in the next day, you can't go back and give it a specific date to say, I want to run this as of December 31st, because it's already got more information in it. That's why it's important to run these prior to you doing your closing, before you put new entries in, so that you have the most up-to-date information. You can also run them early to take a look to make sure that you're in balance with a lot of the stuff. Inventory valuation report has an option also called inventory valuation by period, which lets you go back and specify dates. It's only the one that does it. Purchases clearing doesn't, stock status does. So we're going to go over to our setup. Oops, not that one. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to common information. Now, the reason we're going to common information is that Sage has both inventory and miscellaneous items that they save in history. They keep them in common information since the miscellaneous items don't have an inventory itself. So we're going to go in here and we're going to go to common information options to get our history. So the number of years to retain history, now I'm going to change this to 10 to match all my other ones and click on Excel. This is also where you go in and you set up your decimals and if you want to do expanded item codes. So we're going to come out of that and then we're going to go back to inventory to our setup options for our actual inventory items. And we're going to go to the main tab and we're going to look at the current period, make sure that it's period 12 of your current fiscal year that you're going to be closing. Now, we've already decided on what our history was over in common information, so there isn't anything else in here that we need to worry about. The one report that you will want to reconcile to your general ledger at year end is going to be your inventory trial balance report. And this is the one when you do your transactions from inventory to the general ledger, it writes it to this. The trial balance should match the inventory account or accounts that you have defined in your general ledger. Now, those are set up in your product line maintenance. Under each of the product lines, under the accounts, you'll have an inventory account number. You can have one inventory account or multiple inventory accounts, but the trial balance report will show you the totals for everything. And we're going to look at this one, inventory trial balance here. And we can do it by product line. We can separate it by warehouse. It comes up automatically as December, and then we're going to preview it. And this will show us everything that we have in our inventory by warehouse. If you have multiple warehouses, what your beginning balance was, what the activity was, this would be what was posted, and what your ending balance is. Then these are your quantities, and this is the dollar amounts. It'll show you the valuation, the total ending balance, and then at the end of it, you will have a report total. This number should match your general ledger inventory account. If it doesn't, there's usually reasons for it. Something got posted to your general ledger account that didn't flow through the standard modules with inventory, like sales order, purchase order, inventory. Maybe somebody posted an accounts payable invoice into that. So there are reasons why they won't match, but they should. So with inventory, you can do negative quantities. It allows you to ship something if you don't have it. Maybe you haven't done your receipt of goods and you need to get the shipment out. And so you just ship it and it will go negative until you update. And it can create what's called a negative cost tier. There is a function in here. And we're going to go down to the period end. And we're going to run this report. And I think mine only has one in it because it's test data, but yours may have more, may not have it. So this is going to show you if you have negative quantities, and then it'll show you what you have on hand. So for specific warehouses, I can go over here and run what's called an inventory negative tier adjustment, and it will match or try to match any negative tier with a positive tier in my cost detail in inventory. So if I go here and run my negative tier adjustment, as of here, 12/31/2025, it will come up because I have a positive tier there, and it will create an entry. Now, if there's a difference in the cost, so when I sold it, it may have only been a $30 unit cost. When I received it in, it may have been a $40 unit cost. So my inventory cost tiers would be different, and I might have a dollar amount different, which will post to the general ledger. But for this one, my costs are the same, so there's actually no posting that I need to worry about. Then it's going to ask me if I want to update. I'm going to say yes. It'll ask me if I want to print my daily transaction register, and I'm going to say yes. Now, because there was no adjustment, I'm getting a message that the file is empty. But if it wasn't, if there was a cost adjustment, you would see posting to your. Now, if I go back and I run my negative tier report again, you see how it's taken out to 8. Now, I still have these other ones that I don't have any inventory that I can offset against it. And you would need to do inventory adjustments to bring these back to 0 or whatever your actual quantity is. Now, we're going to just touch briefly on physical count. Some people do physical count entry at year end, other people don't. Basically, what you want to make sure all your transactions have been processed prior to freezing. When you would go in here, freeze your inventory, which locks in your quantities. It will come up with a physical count worksheet. You can do it for specific items, bins, inventory cycles. You can sort it by item code. You can freeze it, unfreeze it, and then put in your physical counts and update them. Sage has a very good article, KB 20914, on physical count processing. If you need assistance with it, you've never done it before, you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us on the help desk and we can walk you through. You also have the option in here with your purge. So if we go to utilities, to remove 0 quantity cost tiers. And the reason we do that is if we look in inventory and you look in your cost detail, you may have a list of them in there with 0 quantity, no extension, and they don't really ever get cleared out. So this gets rid of a lot of them. It gets rid of a lot of clutter. It's something that I would recommend doing on a fairly regular basis. Just review them and see. And if you go in here, it'll ask you what date you want to do this as of. You pick your date, click on proceed, and it'll remove all those 0 quantity cost tiers. Then over here, we've got our report selections. the stock status report, which you may or may not want to print, your valuation report, which again, you can only print before you do any other future transactions. There's a turnover report that will show you by month how much you've sold, your sales analysis report, sales history. The inventory detailed transaction report can be printed at any time. It's not necessary to do it at the end of the year or the period. And we are going to go over to our period end processing. Do not want to print the reports. We're going to click on proceed. So it's basically the same process for each of the modules when it comes up. If it comes up. Sometimes it just disappears. And then it'll come up and ask you if you wanted to update it. Obviously, it's not going to do it for me on this one. Okay, moving on to accounts receivable, which is next on our list. We're just going to do receivables, payables, inventory, sales order, purchase order, and general ledger today. There obviously are more modules, but we're limited in the amount of time that we have. But again, if you want to work on them, other ones, or you have any questions on these, feel free to reach out. We'll provide contact information at the end. So, accounts receivable, prior to your year-end processing, you want to change your module date, you want to review your setup options, make sure all your invoices and cash receipts are recorded. If you're doing finance charge calculation, you want to do that and update it. Printing any customer statements. If you're doing sales tax and you're doing it monthly, you want to print that out and purge it. If you're doing salesperson commission reports, you want to review that and update it. And then we're going to look at the aged invoice report and the accounts receivable trial balance. First, we're going to go to our setup. I'm going to take a look at our options and what needs to be done here. So in our accounts receivable options, we're going to look on the main tab, make sure we're in the correct period. We're going to go to the additional tab and open item. Now, this has changed. It used to be the number of days to retain paid invoices. Now it's the number of months. And because I'm saving my history for 10 years, I'm going to save this for 120 months, meaning I'm saving this for 10 years. You can make it whatever you want. What happens is when you go in and an invoice is considered paid after the cash receipt has been done, and after the particular time period that you have defined in here, it will roll off your customer maintenance screen, so you will not see it anymore. It will still be in your history, but you won't be able to go through that. That's why an archive company is always a good idea if you need to go back and you need to look at something for prior years and you're only saving this for 30 days or 3 months or whatever you want to do. The next thing we're going to look at is the history tab. And this I'm going to change to my 10 years, just like everybody else. And this is this is the number of years to retain cash receipts. I have it set to 99. You can have a maximum of 99. And these you can have a maximum of 99 years as well. You can save them as long as you want, what makes the most sense for you. So we're going to retain our salesperson history for 10 years, our customer history for 10 years, and our cash receipts. We can change that to 10 years as well, so that everybody agrees. Now the 2 reports, and then it will ask us if we want to make changes. We can say yes. The 2 reports that we're going to look at are the accounts receivable trial balance and the accounts receivable aging. Now, theoretically, if your invoice date and your posting date are within the same month, these two reports will match. The aged invoice report, and we're going to run this. We'll break it down by the current buckets that you have defined in your setup options. So this is my current 30, 60, 90, 120, which is how I want to see it. And then it will give you a total at the end of here is what my balance is. Now, the inventory trial balance report is based on your posting date, what accounting date you're using, and that's what posts to the general ledger. So if I run this one, it doesn't age it like the other one does, but it gives me all of the transactions that have happened based on my posting date. And at the end, I get a balance, which should agree to my accounts receivable invoice report. In my case, it will, because my dates always match. So, but sometimes you may put in, so say you got an invoice in October that was for a December invoice date. You put the invoice date in as December, but you posted it back in November. When you ran your aged invoice report, it's not going to show up on your aged invoice report because the date is outside that period of November. But if you run your trial balance report, it will be in there because that's the date you posted it to. That's why these two don't match. Now, your trial balance report, since this is your posting to your general ledger, should match your general ledger accounts payable account that you have defined in accounts payable division name. If it doesn't, we need to check to see if there are other postings in there that don't belong, adjusting journal entries, things that didn't run through accounts payable or purchase order that would not have hit this module so that you wouldn't, they wouldn't balance. I'm going to close out of that. Then we're going to go over to our period report selection. And again, if you're doing finance charges, commission reports, any of those, do them before you do your closing. And we're getting the message that it needs to be closed. Honestly, we're going to print the reports so you can see them. These are all the reports that are available. And again, if you have some of these reports that you've got custom versions on, you can change that so that it prints them if you want to print them here, or you don't necessarily have to. But you've got your aged invoice and trial balance, sales analysis, sales tax reports, monthly, salesperson history. So there's all kinds of reports that can be run. They don't necessarily all have to be run at period. So we're going to go back to period end processing. Skip the print report part. And we're going to get the message it's going to be changed. We're going to say yes. And we're done. Okay. Once the accounts receivable module is closed, any temporary customers with zero balance are purged unless you are retaining temporary customers, which you can define in your options. Your monthly sales, cash receipts, and salesperson history is retained based on the selections you made in the options. And the open invoices with zero balance are removed based on the number of months to retain paid invoices. So those are all the settings, and that's what it will do if you have them set to specific time periods. Accounts payable is our next one we're going to look at. And prior to doing that, going to change the module date. We're going to review the options. We're going to verify that all invoices and checks are recorded in the current month. We're going to print the aged invoice report and the trial balance report and review them. Make sure the trial balance reconciles to the general ledger. And we're going to print the check history report and review that as well. And we're going to talk briefly about 1099 processing. We're not going to go through 1099 processing today. We have another webinar scheduled on Thursday, which will walk you through the whole 1099 processing. And if you have payroll, it's also going to do the payroll year-end processing. So we're going to go to accounts payable down to setup. And we're going to pick the options. And on the main tab, we're going to verify that we've got our date set correctly. We're going to go to the additional tab. And we're going to change our number of months. And we're going to, now we can have it remove the paid invoices for receivables and payables during period end, or we can wait for year end too. It's an option, it's a fairly new option with Sage, which is nice because sometimes after period end, you don't necessarily want to remove them all, but at year end, you might want to get rid of some of the old ones. Then we're going to go to the history tab, and we're going to change this to 10 years so that it's like the other ones. We're going to click on accept, and it will save our settings. Oh, I forgot. For those of you who use ACH, we're going to go to the ACH tab, and if we had enabled it and had this, then we also have the option to save these for up to 99 years as well. So moving on to the reports, we are going to look at the accounts receivable aged invoice report and the accounts receivable trial balance report. It's the same functionality as the accounts payable. It's the same functionality as accounts receivable. The aged invoice report is based on your invoice date that you've put in there. Your trial balance is based on your posting date, what posts to your general ledger. Theoretically, these should both balance if your invoice date and your posting date are within the same month, but if they're not, then you would have a discrepancy. So this one, the aged invoice report, we're going to go in. Now, you can print these if you have divisions for both receivables and payables, if you want to split them up and you've got different account numbers. For all intents and purposes for vendors, we only have one, so we're just going to print them all together. And then we're going to go in here and take a look. This, just like accounts receivable, ages by the buckets that you have set up in your options. And at the end, we get our total that should match our general ledger, or our trial balance and our general ledger, but doesn't necessarily. Okay, so we're going to go to our trial balance report, and we're going to run this as of 12/31, and we're going to do it in detail so we can see all of them. And then we're going to take a look at this. And this has all of our transactions and then our balances. So this should match our receivable, or our payable aging report. And this should also match, this needs to match our general ledger. If it doesn't match the general ledger, it could be because there are other postings in there that don't belong. So you want to verify that before you come and you do your year-end processing, that those two do match. We go in and we do our report selection. These are the options that are available. Now with our 1099s, we touched briefly on this. If we go into, if we're using 1099 reporting, we want to make sure, one thing that we have this one, right? There we go. So we want to make sure that we have our 1099 box checked, that we've got this set up for the current year. And if it doesn't, it will create the boxes for you, like mine has to do. So I'm at 2025, and then you want to make sure all your vendors are set up properly as 1099 vendors. And then you can go into the vendors themselves and take a look. There's a report that you can run, your payment history, which allows you to print, and it will give you a date. You can do it by a date range. So I can do January to December, and I can only print my 1099 vendors. And then I can go back and look in my vendors and see if the balances are correct. Now, they might not be if you had a 1099 vendor, you didn't have their information at first, so they weren't marked as a 1099 vendor in the beginning of the year or something. You can go back in 1099s and you can change the amounts in the field so that when you do your 1099 printing, that information is correct. So once we're done with all of that, we're going to go to period end processing. Get the reports. It'll tell us it's going to be changed. Ask us if we want to complete. We're going to say yes, and then we're done. So it's going to remove any temporary vendors with zero balances unless we've told it not to. Your electronic payment history is removed based on the number of years you set. Your vendor purchase history is removed based on the number of years. And open invoices with zero balance are removed based on the number of months you have set. And last but certainly not least is general ledger. Now, general ledger doesn't need to be closed right away, and general ledger is one of those modules that was designed to not be set. So once you close the other modules, you really shouldn't go back and reopen them, just because it can cause problems with the reporting and everything. General ledger, if you make a mistake and you close general ledger, you can reopen it, put your entries in, and reclose it without any problems. So before we start, we want to make sure that we've got the module date, we review the options, make sure that there is no transaction entry. Now, sometimes if you don't do your daily transaction registers, they will sit in general ledger waiting for somebody to do them. If you go to general ledger, the main menu, and you go to daily transaction register, it's always a good idea before you close your general ledger to go in here and run this report. Now mine is empty because I closed mine last night. But if you see that there are some in there, go ahead, review them, make sure that they're all valid, and then close it so that all of your general ledger postings have been done. If you're going to do recurring journal entries, make sure you do them prior to that. So you can do them in here, run a recurring journal entry. You can do your allocation entries if you use those, which allows you to split out. I have some set up here. And what this does is, if, say I want to take my source account utilities and I want to break it out between departments, or I want to break it out between just different GL accounts, this will let me do it. I can do it by allocation percentage or dollar amount or whatever. And I want to do that before I do my general ledger period end. Put in any closing adjustments for the period. This does not need to be done right at 12/31 or shortly thereafter. This may take a while before you have all your closing entries, but you just want to make sure that you've got everything in. So put your closing adjustments once you get them, print and update your daily transaction register, and then we want to print our reports to make sure that we've got all the information correct and everything is in balance. So the first thing we're going to run is the general ledger trial balance. As of 12/31, we can do it ending balance, beginning, ending, whatever we want. We want to keep it simple. We use just the ending balance. And this, we want to make sure that all our numbers look good. Not only that, at the end that it's in balance. If you get a message that says it's out of balance, it means your debits and credits don't match, something has happened, it didn't post correctly. It can be fixed with a one-sided journal entry or an adjustment. So you just want to make sure that this is in balance before you do your closing. The other things we want to print are financial reports. So we have standard financial statements. There is a cash flow. There's also trend reports that you can print, which shows you postings for every month, which kind of gives you an idea if there's something that looks really weird. Say your one account is suddenly $1 million and last year it was 10,000. You can run the trend report and it will show you the months where there were large amounts of postings, which will help you. You can also run your general ledger detail reports, which will show you that information as well. The trend report is just a summary. So we're just going to pick the balance sheet and the income statement. I'm going to hit proceed. And we're going to preview them. And it will come up with our balance sheet. We want to make sure that our assets and our liabilities both match. If not, there's a problem and we need to rectify that. And then it'll run our income statement, which will show us our sales, our costs, and everything. And then this dollar amount here will be our retained earnings for the year. Once we have all that done, then we can start with the other thing we want to do. I need to back up just a little bit and do the setup options, because there are a couple of things that we want to touch base on. So in our setup options, we have our number of years to retain our general ledger. We have our current fiscal period. Resetting our journal numbers. I don't recommend people do that, but a lot of people like to do it. And the reason I don't recommend it is sometimes when you run reports, something will pop up from a prior year if you're using the same journal number. The computer gets confused every once in a while. It's not something that happens all the time, but I've seen it happen. So I like to just use the next number going forward. We also have the option of doing budgets, which will do it automatically if you have this set up, or you can choose to do your budgets manually if you want to make changes. We can set it to copy the actual budget, which are your actual numbers, over to the default budget at the year end, and we've made this our default budget is our original budget. And then we're going to go to our period end processing. Proceed. Now, because I didn't do my allocations, it's going to come up with a warning message to tell me I haven't posted them. I can continue without doing them, or I can say no, go back and do my allocations, and then come back in. I'm going to say yes, because I don't really care about my allocations at this point. And then these are the reports that you can print, which we already, we looked at the trial balance and the financials. There's also a general ledger analysis and the general ledger detail. And the general ledger detail report, if you print that out and you have a lot of transactions, can get very lengthy. So I would make sure that you're printing it to a PDF and not to paper, because you're going to lose a few trees when you do that. So we're going to go to back to here and tell it we don't want to print the period end reports. We're going to proceed. We're going to say yes. And then we get the message, which we didn't get the first time. It'll say it's been closed, period one. We haven't printed the period end reports, we know. We're going to say yes. And it just goes through its little process and it's done. The period end processing takes a matter of minutes. It's the setup, the reconciliations, and all the other stuff that will take a while longer. I recommend if your year end is the end of this month, you start looking at your open orders, your inventory, all of that, so that you have it reconciled before the end of the month so that you're not scrambling at the end. Now, what does closing the general ledger module do? Any account with a deleted status can be removed based on the activity and if you're going to retain the history. But if the copy actual to budget checkbox is selected, the actual amounts for that year are copied to the default budget for the current year. Options for resetting the journal numbers. If you decide you do want to use if you want to reset it, it will put them all back to one. If the clear balances checkbox in the main account maintenance is selected, balances are cleared for non-financial accounts. And if you're retaining transaction history, all the year is updated and any history with no activities removed based on the options you have selected. So that's the quick version of closing the module. So we're going to go back to our PowerPoint presentation for some information that might prove useful to you. The recordings can be found on our YouTube channel. You will be getting a copy of the recording if you were registered for this. If you want to sign up for the 1099 and payroll webinar and you register and you can't make it, you will still be given a copy of the recording, so you'll still have it. If you need to set up Atrix e-filing or have any questions, this is Atrix's website. If you need to order checks from Sage or any forms from Sage, you can go to this website. And the Sage City has some nice year-end processes if you want to take a look at those too. If you need to contact us, if you have any questions, you just have a quick question on this or anything to do with year-end processing, here's the help desk contact information. I am the manager of the help desk, so you can reach us online, you can call us, you can email us. It'll create a support ticket and someone will get back to you. If you prefer, you can contact me directly. That's my phone number. I warn you, I'm on the phone a lot. But if you email me, I am way more responsive. I will get back to you if you call me. It just may not be right away.